to episode 35 on the journey to conscious healthcare. We're in series 6, which is called From Theory to Practice, Mastering Positive Behaviour Support, episode 2. In this episode, we explore what it takes to consciously create longevity, happiness, and fulfillment in your life and that of others. The journey to conscious healthcare looks at the healthcare industry, disability sector, and how to best navigate these areas to get the best for you and your life. I'm your host, Trevor Keane, and I'm the founder and CEO of Conscious Healthcare SA, an expert company that is known for high-quality healthcare services and transforming the healthcare industry in the disability space. Today's show is also sponsored by us at Conscious Healthcare SA. Conscious Healthcare SA has got 2 clinics now in South Australia, them being in Mawson Lakes and also where I am today in Seacliff. Not only that, we've also got instant capacity coming up for psychology services, and you heard that here first. We're adding that to our suite of services. If you are interested in getting in touch, please do that via our website and ensure that you don't have to sit on yet another wait list. I'm sure you've heard of those before, Joe. On that note, let's introduce Jo. Welcome, Jo. Let's say a little bit about her. She's got a Bachelor of Psychology, Diploma of Counselling. So counselling is also a lecturer in the disability and community inclusion within the College of Nursing and Health Sciences at Flinders University. She contributes to content development and lectures in positive behaviour support within the Bachelor of Disability and Developmental Education, which, fun fact here, DEs or Developmental Education is also founded at Flinders University, we should add in. She's also got a graduate involved in the graduate certificate in positive behaviour support. Jo started her career as a crisis counsellor and began specialising in PBS for people with disabilities 13 years ago. She's been on the Behaviour Support Practitioners Australia, also known as the BSPA Board of Directors since 2023, and has contributed to numerous advisory groups, PBS resource project evaluations, communities of practice, and focus groups. Jo has a particular interest in promoting quality clinical supervision for behaviour practitioners. She is the director of Your Life Matters, developing behaviour support, clinical supervision, training and PBS consultancy across Australia. On first note, welcome to you, Jo. Thanks for taking the time out.
Hello. Oh, thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Likewise, we've got a bit of a quirky question to start with. We always start off with a personal one just to get things going. So I'd love to know for you, what's a quirky or strange habit or hobby that you have?
I don't know if it's strange or quirky, but I'm into miniature art or miniature crafting. So I am just wrapping up my first doll's house that I've fully finished and developed, and I'm obsessed with miniature things. I always have been. I've always loved them. And then last year I was in Toronto and I went to this display called Little Canada. And it was basically all of Canada in miniature. And you could barely drag me out of there. It was fascinating to look at. I was so taken and charmed by it. And so since I've been home, since that trip, I've become obsessed to the extent that I built a studio in my backyard so that I've got somewhere to do this weird little craft. Dolls' houses and miniatures. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. I can't relate to that exactly. I can relate to, I went into the UK and they had all those little bricks and little sort of areas that they reshift to make the towns up and that. And I found it very cool.
Yeah.
On that note, let's jump into PBS. So for those that don't know, so I've mentioned a fair bit about Jo's background. We're going to start off with what PBS is and its importance. So can you give us a bit of an overview for anyone that's not heard of it before?
Yeah, well, PBS is Positive Behaviour Support. It's a focus. It's actually most often understood as being individualised, but there's actually a tiered approach to positive behaviour support. There's 3 tiers. So the tier 1, which is what we refer to typically as the for all. So there's a for all approach to positive behaviour support. Lots of things that we can do in our society and in systems that can that use the positive behaviour support framework to support people, whether that's children, young learners, the elderly, people with disabilities, anybody anybody who may need it. Tier 2 is the for some. So that's more specialised or individualised behaviour support for people who may need it. That would be things like what do they call them? Like skills development group, or foundation support groups, things like that. So groups and smaller groups, breakout groups. At school, it might be the breakout groups for those who need to learn in a different way, those kinds of things. That would be level 2. And then level 3 is individualized positive behavior support, which is the most well known mainly because that's what the NJS fund at the moment is, individualized positive behavior support. And that is all about environmental change and creating capable environments for people. Positively reinforcing desirable behaviour is kind of an overlay of putting it, but even that sentence puts more focus on the person and the person's behaviour than positive behaviour support framework really wants to do. It's really more about how can we create environments and systems for people that mean that anybody, whether they have a disability or not, can live the life that they want to live.
Oh, fantastic. Well, so people get travel bugs. You've been doing this for 13 years, so you've got the PBS bug, I would say. So what attracted you to it? I'm curious to know. You're very passionate about it, clearly.
I am really passionate about it. It was a little bit of a falling into it, in terms of, obviously I was interested in, I had a whole other career before I came along to this. I have a communications degree, and I worked in marketing and communications in a couple of different roles, and I never really enjoyed it. Well, I enjoyed aspects of it, but I didn't enjoy the job itself, particularly around marketing and public affairs. So yeah, I just found myself around that time. Something I had always wanted to do since I was a lot younger was volunteer at Lifeline. So just because I was looking for a bit more meaning in my life. When I was younger, I'm single and had no children and no responsibilities whatsoever. I thought the commitment that you had to go through to become a Lifeline crisis supporter was too much, and there was no way I could fit that into my life. So I waited until I had children and had a career and had loads and loads of responsibilities, and then decided that it was a good time to do it. Anyway, I went ahead and did that, became a volunteer crisis supporter at Lifeline. And then I realised I was getting paid to do something I didn't enjoy, and I was volunteering to do something I did enjoy. So I decided to go back to uni and study. And so I studied psychology and counselling. And over that period of time, I took on a paid role at Lifeline, and I was going in that kind of mental health and crisis support direction. And then I got a role at Autism SA, and started to understand behaviour, or started to understand the need for people with autism in particular to be supported, to develop or to have ways to get what they wanted and needed, and so on and so forth. And yeah, that kind of led into, at that time, a little while after I'd started Autism SA, the NDIS was rolling out. I realised the job I was doing was pretty much a behaviour consultant, we were called. And yeah, I just realised that that's where my passion lay. I had always been interested in human behaviour. Lots of people are, though. But yeah, I just felt like as well that I had a knack for it, a bit of an understanding, an ability to sort of see or understand inherently that function of behaviour isn't always obvious. People don't always know themselves why they're behaving a certain way. There's a lot of preconceptions and misconceptions and myths and whatnot in society around behaviour and what drives human behaviour and all of that. It was all really interesting to me. So I just found myself going that direction. And I'll just tell you this quickly. I worked for an oil and gas company for a while, and I used to sit in meetings and think, how boring to talk about oil and gas all day. What would it be like to sit in meetings and talk about things that you're interested in? Wonder what that would be like. And that's my life since I came into this field, is that I just spend all day, every day, talking about things that interest me, which is great.
I think
I
that's
get to help people.
Well, we had Dr. Erin Leek this morning, and she went through and she exuberated all that passion and joy, exactly like what you're expressing today. I think maybe this is an opportunity for us to give back right here and now in regards to if you were someone that was joining and wanted to come into the positive behaviour support space and become a behaviour support practitioner, what might be the sorts of things that would attract them to the field? Because I think it's really important if someone's coming in that they understand what it involves, what do they need to be good at, and all that sort of stuff. Because it's like the whole when you go to uni and then you're like 1 or 2 years in and you're like, oh, do I really want to do that? You've now started your placements. It's like, what have I got myself into? What sorts of things would you say a behaviour support practitioner should enjoy if this is a career for them as such?
Well, I mean, if you're interested in human behaviour, it's a really good way to be involved in human behaviour. You don't have to be a fully qualified psychologist to be a behaviour practitioner. If you are passionate, if you want a job where you can feel really passionate and be really passionate and do a lot, be really active in trying to support other people, then this could be a role for you. It's certainly not easy, and not an easy. It's something that really does require passion, I would say. But at the same time as well, it also I think it could be attractive as a role to people who really want to facilitate opportunities for change. A lot of the time people talk about behaviour practitioners help people change their behaviour or help those around people change their behaviour, but really it's a job facilitating opportunity. And I think that's what I really like about it. A lot of the time you don't necessarily see results or the results that you're looking for. You see insofar as seeing change because that's in the hands of others, but you do get to see what your good work has, what doors your good work has opened up for people, what opportunities you're able to open up for people, how you can resolve. Lots of people like this job as well because there is an element of advocacy, so you get a lot of opportunities to get involved in situations that might seem really unfair or not the way that they should be, and you can get really get your teeth into that a bit as well and get passionate about it.
Oh, that's awesome. I remember earlier today, Erin was alluding to the mindset's one of the first things. If you're going to come into it, you need to have the mindset that people with disabilities can do.
Yeah.
So really having that approach, that fits in quite nicely with what you said there about advocacy and wanting to see people achieve that potential, I guess, and
Yeah,
doors.
absolutely. That's actually probably something I've really enjoyed about my journey is understanding what it looks like, what ableism looks like, what it really looks like, what human-centeredness or human rights really look like, what person-centeredness really looks like. And I mean, you can take some punches sometimes. You can realize, that I have a story where I tell people that years and years ago, I worked for a brief time in a nursing home. I was like in an admin role, but it was a little bit of a sort of slightly a bit of a operations management sort of role. So it was a very small nursing home, and I remember on one side of the nursing home there were 2 wings, and one side was fully locked down. Everybody in this nursing home had dementia to varying levels, and one side of the nursing home was more open and the other side was fully locked. So people couldn't freely move and come and go from that wing and so forth. And I remember once going down the back corridor and I saw that one of the locked doors had been wedged open with a chair. And I said, oh, who's wedged this door open? We can't do that. We've got people who are vulnerable and they would be really unsafe. And a carer said to me, oh, we're just trying to give them a bit of freedom. There's plenty of us around at the moment. So we just wanted to give them some freedom. And I said, oh, we can't do that. That's taking a risk with their safety and their well-being. And that's outrageous, and close this door immediately. And I'm only telling that story. It's not a proud story to tell, but it's a really common way that people think about people with disabilities or people who are elderly or may have, for whatever reason, less capacity than they used to have. It's easy to think about that. Really what I was talking about was my own comfort and my own feelings about what if somebody wandered out, and what would we do, and their safety. I need to be able to sleep at night. Excuse me, their freedom isn't as important as me being comfortable, that they're safe. So yeah, I think it's a great job to really, or a great role where you really get to look at those kinds of things. And so from a personal development perspective as well, you get there's a lot of that personal development in the role as well. And I would say it's never ending. I'm sure there's still more for me to learn in terms of those sorts of aspects of people with disabilities, their rights, and who people with disabilities are, and how they should be free to live their lives.
Oh, that's awesome. It's a good story, full 360, I would sort of say. Whilst we are talking about why you might get into the profession, let's talk about what are the essential skills and attributes that would make up a good PBS practitioner, a great PBS practitioner. What might they be?
First and foremost, I think formal training is absolutely paramount. Lots of people come into the role of behaviour practitioner with a background in ... So you might have social work or occupational therapy, or another allied health. You might be a developmental educator, a psychologist, or a psych grad. There's lots of different pathways in, and I think those are appropriate pathways, but they're not the end. They don't necessarily lead to a fully qualified, in my mind, a fully qualified practitioner has had more formal training than that in two key areas, specifically positive behaviour support, as in the positive behaviour support framework, and functional behaviour analysis. They're two things that are they're not really picked up on in the field things. So I think that formal training, some soft skills, resilience is probably the number one thing that I think of, and the ability to understand what a good day's at work looks like. For a behaviour practitioner, it's not necessarily I went in and I made these changes and now that person's life is better. It's I went in and made some recommendations. I went in and put a heap of work into collecting and analysing data. I went in and wrote a recommendation report for the NDIS for this person to get more funding. Even if that person didn't get more funding, or their environment didn't change, or something didn't come out of that, to know that that's still good work that you did. So where you get that job satisfaction from, you have to have passion. Resilience and passion probably go hand in hand. It's not an easy job. There's a lot of chaos in our field. And I mean that respectfully, but there's a lot of things changing, and relying on funding, and relying on services, and relying on things. There's no real status quo. Everything's constantly changing. Legislation is changing, and rules are changing, and personal circumstances for individuals are changing. So rolling with the punches, being resilient, keeping up, making something out of something makes sense, following process and following evidence-based best practice, those sorts of things. I think the last thing I would mention would be buy-in. You have to believe in what you're doing. And that probably ties in nicely with the idea around being educated in the area as well. I do see practitioners in the field who don't necessarily believe in what they're doing. It seems like they don't believe in what they're doing, or they don't fully understand what they're doing. And so that makes it pretty hard to sell. And so much of what we're doing relies on buy-in from others, but buy-in from stakeholders. So believing in what you're doing is probably another thing that I would add to that.
Right, run a couple of things past you just whilst we are talking about that. A couple of my observations over time have been the ability to stay at it, report writing, and that sort of, maybe it fits into resilience, but like that concentration, and like some of these reports can be quite large. I don't know where you sort of see report writing, but then I also sort of think of like project management kind of deals with that chaos. So like, as in, you've got to see where everyone's at, but also mixing that in with stakeholder management engagement. So making sure that we're clear in regards to expectations, making sure that we're communicating as we need to, getting in touch. There's a whole lot of that resilience comes into like chasing up multiple times, like you've tried already, but for the sixth time, that rebooking that you need to do. I'm curious to know what you think about those couple of things.
Yeah, I think they're all really, really relevant and really important. And you said like project manager. I've heard others compare it to being an operations manager, where you're sort of, it's left brain and right brain, isn't it? Really, because it's a lot to do with things like some of those real hard skills, like you said, organizational skills, and persistence and resilience, and being organized, being able to write reports, being able to organize information, being analytical. It occurred to me as well, something we were talking about in the pre-discussion, critical thinking. I'd say that's probably the number one thing, is being able to be a critical thinker. And at the same time, though, you're applying a process, and I'm not sure how to put this eloquently. We're not making anything up as we're going along. There's evidence behind everything that we're doing. It's a science. It's the PBS, is the science, and functional behavior analysis. PBS is a framework. Functional behavior analysis is the science of human behavior, that all behavior happens for a reason, and understanding that reason can be a lot more complicated than it first seemed. It puts to mind for me, like in terms of organization, writing a behavior support plan is something that positive behavior support practitioners talk about a lot. That's what I do. I write behavior support plans. But in fact, what that entails is so much organization from the very beginning of meeting people and building rapport and collecting data and knowing what data is and knowing how to find it, knowing how to turn information into data, knowing how to create baselines that can be measured against, knowing how to, that's all very analytical and process driven. And at the same time, you're sitting at somebody's kitchen table while they're unloading their, how overwhelmed they are, and they might be crying and they might be saying, I don't know what to do. I'm parenting a child who's got a disability and I don't know how to, I don't know any of this stuff. So you've got that real juxtaposition of wanting to be supportive and wanting to help people and wanting to give advice and be really warm and be really helpful and leave them with something that feels valuable. And at the same time, you want to be data driven and analytical and apply critical thinking. So I think it's finding that balance. And for me, the overriding thing is organization. It's all about organizing it all and being organized in your mind and in your practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just written down here EQ and SQ, so emotional intelligence, social intelligence. As you sort of said, the organisation. And an important point that you put there, I thought as well, was in regards to, I was listening to a podcast recently and they go through how it's so much easier to add than it is to critically analyse and look at what's going on. And actually, maybe it might be removing, for example. Often we want to put in our presence that, you have a look at all these different things that pop up around the place. They have people's names usually associated with them because of the status, the recognition, whatever else it is. Yeah. Sometimes it might be actually the removal of something, which looks like you're not doing anything, but like that can also be adding value by not actually adding something in. So like what you're saying, trusting in the process is kind of what I heard there, and making sure that it makes sense based upon the principles. So that's what we do. Whilst we do move in that direction, I'm curious. So industry insights, I'd love to know from you, what's working in the PBS area? So what have you noticed?
I think the fleet of positive behaviour support practitioners are getting more experienced and more knowledgeable. I think we're still a long way from where we ideally want to be. In my role as a board member for the Behaviour Support Practitioners Australia, which we talk a lot about what do behaviour practitioners need, what sort of support do behaviour practitioners need, what learning, what knowledge And for me, actually, it comes from that high level. I think our focus now needs to be more on the behaviour support provider, so the organisation and the organisational aspects of delivering services like positive behaviour support. A lot of it up till now has fallen to the behaviour practitioner, and a lot of times they may not be equipped from a how do you apply this science? How do you apply this therapeutic kind of thing that I'm doing in some kind of business model where I'm worrying about billable hours, or I'm worrying about compliancy and legislation and things like that. So I think moving in that direction, and also clinical supervision, we're getting closer. So what's working is that we're getting closer to those kinds of things. We're getting organizations that are becoming better equipped. Sorry, that was really bad English. That are becoming better equipped to actually offer that service. And we're getting clinical supervisors in the field, and they're not I don't want this to sound disrespectful, but they're not just people who have found themselves in that role because of the 5 practitioners who work at this organisation. I'm the only one who's been here longer than 6 months, so I guess I'm the leader.
So governance, is that what I'm hearing? Like the level of governance around, that they've quality across the board is quality, right? So it's like if I went from here to here across all different organizations, they would all meet what the bar is, right? So the minimum expected bar in regards to if I'm a supervisor, I'm not just in that role, I'm there because I've actually got some level of experience and I'm actually got the skills to be able to then pass on, and that sort of wisdom. Is that what I'm hearing?
I guess so. I think I'm also talking about the separation or the distinction between clinical supervision and operations management and governance.
So that's a good one.
Not to say that one person can't play both those roles, but that's a whole set of skills right there. And then also that it's not the humble behaviour practitioner. And by that, I mean an early careers practitioner, somebody who really that's their bread and butter, that's the job they want to do, that's their specialty, that's their career. And notwithstanding the fact that people like to move into those roles, but we have had a really young in age and, more importantly, young in experience field for under the NDIS, for as long as the NDIS has been in place. So we're moving in a better direction. I think there's a lot more training available. There's a lot more leaders. There's the BSPA now. And if I can just jump in, and the Behaviour Support Practitioners Australia is your peak body for behaviour practitioners. Our focus is all around legitimising and recognising it as an independent role. So you're not a social worker doing PBS or a psychologist doing PBS, or you're a behaviour practitioner. I mean, you can be those things as well, but you're a behaviour practitioner in and of itself. That is recognised properly and in the way that we need it to be by the Commission and by the field itself and by other specialists and all the rest of it. And that we can stand up to that. We've got the skills, we've got the knowledge, we are specialists. For behaviour practitioners to walk comfortably into rooms and know that they are the behaviour specialist in the room, and that they bring specialty with them. And then also advocacy for behaviour practitioners, taking back our profession and being able to be the Commission, the Quality Safe and Safeguarding Commission, are regulators. They regulate the field in terms of legislation, and part of legislation is quality practice. But what that quality practice looks like, how people learn it, how people apply it, how they're held to a certain standard, that's something we can do as a field. So I really encourage anybody listening who's a behaviour practitioner or a aspiring behaviour practitioner to join the BSPA. We're as strong as the members that we have, and we're going in a good direction. And so that's something that's working in the field, is that we are legitimising day by day.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, let's throw it out there then, Joe. So if Joe is going to come and work at Conscious Healthcare SA, aka looking for a business, if you're going to go join somewhere, what would they be providing? What would that look like? Because what you just indicated there is it's important to make sure the organisation has the structure and the framework that supports, right? So there's the operational aspects, but there's also the clinical oversight and governance that needs to be in place. What would you be looking for in that sort of space? And that leads quite well into our next question about training and development, but we'll just stick with that one.
Yes. I think that what people should be able to look for is, or like practitioners should be looking for, is an organisation that is across its responsibilities, governance and legislation wise, quality wise, that if you're coming in as a practitioner, you understand what's expected from you. So you know that there's a framework in the field that was developed by the Quality Safeguarding Commission, the competency framework. And so that, I don't know what the word is, positions practitioners as core, proficient, advanced or specialist, I think is the top one. No, not specialist. Is it specialist? Anyway.
Licensed specialist.
Yeah, and then there's competencies that you would demonstrate. It's really it's not that whole framework is not run or governed by the commission at all, which often comes as a surprise to people. All practitioners are deemed suitable by the commission, and then you are what you are self-assessed, and you rely on your organisation and your supervisor to use that framework or a framework to help you develop professionally, recognise where your skill set lies, what your value is, where you are in terms of whether you should be supervising others and things like that. So I would expect some kind of model to be in place, and for that to be something that is really well understood right through the organisation. So key areas like HR and management have an understanding of those things as well. It's not just the team leader in the behaviour support team struggling with, you know, trying to understand it, and behaviour practitioners absorbing so much of the fear and the responsibility to be meeting legislative requirements, when if you work for an organisation that is about the behaviour, you're not personally the behaviour support provider, you work for a behaviour support provider, you should be being supported and protected, and you should understand. So things like practice models, you know, that we were talking about briefly before we started. You know, Conscious Healthcare, I've got a practice model that shows and supports behaviour practitioners in, this is a process, this is how you might apply the process, this is who you'd turn to for support with the process, this is what you're paid to do this process, this is the level that we see you as, this is what we expect from you, this is what we don't expect from you yet, these kinds of things. I think there's enough now of people who've been in the field 6 months being moved into supervisory roles, because not saying someone who's been 6 months in the role couldn't do that, but because they want to do that and they're ready for that and they're equipped for that, rather than out of necessity, and because there's nobody else, and because their organisation doesn't know what they're supposed to be doing. And yeah, I don't know, that was a bit convoluted, but hopefully that.
I understand what you're saying. Well, let's flip a gear here. So in your opinion, what does world-class practice in PBS look like? I'll add a bit more to it. Could you discuss the key components that are integral to achieving the highest PBS standards?
Well, you're throwing some hard, or involved questions at me. So gold standard or evidence-based best practice. It always involves functional behaviour analysis. It involves the positive behaviour support framework. It ideally does not ever involve the use of strategies that have any aversive or restrictive nature to them. It more so, it involves looking at a strategy. If I was writing a strategy to support somebody, and one of the goals is a reduction in undesirable behaviour, bearing in mind that the primary goal would always be an improved quality of life for that person. But one of the goals that goes along with that might be the reduction in undesirable, or let's say the reduction in risky or harmful behaviour, is that I have the take the time and have the ability to look at that strategy being geared towards that, being geared towards an improvement in quality of life, and that it is person-centered in that way. So meaning it is about what that person wants and the kind of life they want to live, even if that's not a life that other people may want to live. I have a really great example of that, where a practitioner was supporting somebody who had a degenerative disease. I can't remember what it was, but it might have been early onset dementia, something like that. But she was saying to me, Joe, I think maybe he used to be in a bikie gang, and he's all for the thug life. And she was saying, like he's a real man's man. He's very blokey. He's very tough, talks tough and wants to be tough, and he swears and he smokes and he likes a beer. And, I don't want to offend anyone listening to this, but there was more than what I've just listed. But ultimately, she was saying, and I think the biggest problem at the moment is where he's living in this supported accommodation, they want him to be sweet and humble and quiet, and
environment's not fit for purpose there by the sounds of it.
Right. So,
Yeah.
I said to her, like, you really got to support him to live the life he wants to live. If he wants to go to the roughest pub in Adelaide and have beers with whoever he wants to go and have beers with, then we want to try and support that, notwithstanding obviously safety and duty of care and so forth. That's a whole other conversation. But it's really, the gold standard is really being able to think like that, really being able to understand that people with disabilities have the same rights as people without disabilities, understanding that that sentence is not as simple as it sounds. People who have intellectual disabilities or a perceived inability to make choices still get to make choices.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
To choose their life,
Well, let's dip into training and development. So what training and development opportunities would you recommend for a current practitioner or someone that's entering into the PBS field?
I'd like to see everybody come and do the graduate certificate in positive behaviour support at Flinders University.
I'll put that in the show notes.
Or, I really would. Jokes aside, I think the ideal is to have a degree or a graduate certificate, or as close as you could get to that. So whatever else there might be available, some really formal education around theory, and then as well some support around theory to practice. So for someone already working as a behaviour practitioner who wants to skill up and keep developing, I would say if it's within your if it's possible, I would say do something still. It's not, even if you work already as a behaviour practitioner, the graduate certificate in positive behaviour support is geared for people who already have a foundational understanding anyway. We get lots of existing practitioners coming and doing the graduate certificate, but I would still say explore learning opportunities, and I guess in-house training as well. So my advice to behaviour support providers is to understand the service you're providing and make sure you're facilitating PD opportunities. It's really valuable to, I don't want to talk out of turn here, but it is really valuable to practitioners. I'm sure this is just true across the board for any employee. It's more than just the salary. It's the support. It's the training. It's the development pathway. I might want to be a supervisor, a clinical supervisor. I might want to go into the operations side of it or whatever. So people having that pathway and being supported from a training perspective in-house as well, and investing in people. I heard recently that I don't know how accurate I'm going to be with this, but I heard that if you employ somebody and they stay with you for like their whole working life or the bulk of their working life, whatever, you'll spend $1 million on them. And so that's like it'd be a $1 million investment. So it's you'll get your returns, but it's worth investing. You want to do the upkeep. If you bought $1 million car, you would certainly get it serviced regularly. You'd certainly do some upgrades. You would certainly replace the tires and the brake pads when they were needed. I don't know if that's a good analogy, but yes, this idea of investing, I don't think that's a novel idea coming out of my head, but
no, I think it's quite perfect. I know you wouldn't plug it, but I know we've got 3 of our team members doing your course. I'll grab the link to that and we'll chuck that in the show notes. But it's been fantastic.
cool. Yeah.
A few of our team members in regards to going through the basics and bringing that all the way through in regards to practical. So having someone go through with a participant that they'll start with and they'll see that from where to go. We won't go in depth in that. Maybe we might at another time because of time. But let's jump through. The last question we've got here is looking ahead. This is 20 years into the future. Where do you see PBS 20 years into the future? What will change? What will we see?
It will be very, very heavily focused and well understood and focused on capable environments, system change, that more tiered approach and less solely individualized approach to supporting people. The focus will be increasingly, and in less than 20 years, less on the person and how the person needs to change or how their behavior needs to change, and more about, as I said, capable environments, system changes, things like school, the education system being more accessible, and that's something that has been progressing over years anyway. This is just over the next 20 years. The Behaviour Support Practitioners Australia will be a well-established peak body that supports behaviour practitioners. The whoever is the regulator of the legislation, whatever that looks like, will be equipped to advise and support people to understand, and behaviour support providers to understand legislation and apply it in a practice sense. So that will continue to improve, and hopefully it'll be we've got some really good opportunity here to build the field over the next 20 years. The positive behaviour support practitioner specialty role, I think, will be well respected as a job worldwide.
Oh, that's awesome. I feel like I need to give you a wand. All your wishes look like they come together. You're talking as if they're already happening, which is great. Well, on that note, that does bring today's episode to an end. I hope you have found it educational and learned something from it. As fellow Aussies, you know that there's nothing worse than being stingy. So if you've learned or got some value from this, please do share with anyone who you think might benefit, whether that be a participant, fellow practitioner, support coordinator, or anyone, whoever you think will have any value from the podcast. Joe, before we do close off, do you have any final words you'd like to for our listeners?
If you're listening to this podcast, I'm assuming you're either a behaviour practitioner, a behaviour support provider, a core support provider, or an aspiring member of the disability sector in some kind of way. I would say come and join us. Be in charge of your own career and your own path. Know what you want and need, and seek that in the sector. And and for those behaviour practitioners that are already working in the field, you work really hard. It's a really hard job, and keep it up.
Fantastic. As always, if you have got any feedback for me, please get in touch via email. Likewise, if you've got allied health need, please do get in touch with us at Conscious Healthcare SA. All the information as we discussed will be in the show notes, and we'll see you on next episode. Thank you so much.
Bye.